let's get into the second one here.
All right, we are recording, so whenever you want to start.
Hey everybody, we are back with the Insights podcast presented by Vantage Pro. I am Duke. All the way on the other side of the screen there is Mr. Van Metschke. Yeah, see, Chris looked at the wrong way. And then our special guest, we talked him into coming back.
Yeah.
Criss Niemann from Shure, the illustrious wireless and microphone. You guys really weren't a wireless company. You were a microphone company that does wireless.
We actually started out, Mr. Shure started out in the business selling radio parts. He was a radio distributor because you had to build your own radios back then. You couldn't buy a assembled one. So technically it's a little bit of all of the above. Yes.
So he's like the founder of Radio Shack.
You probably helped them stay in business, that's for sure.
Probably,
Yeah.
Well, if you missed it, and the link is probably down below here. We talked with Chris last episode about this new wireless technology that is really, I think, about ready to change the game of RF for power users. I mean, higher count users for sure. But this WMAS technology. But we ran out of time before we got to kind of get into dreaming a little bit of what this might mean for us. We talked a little bit of application, but this whole episode is all going to be application of what in the world WMAS means for us. And we know some, right? We know some beginning iterations, but I think you knowing more on the inside, kind of want to dream a little of like what you hope will come someday out of this. So let's talk about the known first, though, because it's easier to talk about the known, right?
Hey, it's Van. I just wanted to jump in here real quick and ask you if you like this kind of content to please like and subscribe, share this with a friend, and comment below. We love hearing your comments, and we really do read all of them. So comment below, like and subscribe, and now back to the podcast.
Talk to us about what Shure is doing with this WMAS, and like what are we going to start seeing? We've already started seeing, but like what are we going to see over this kind of first wave of WMAS?
Yeah, absolutely. You may have seen some other manufacturers already talking about some products that's coming out. Certainly by the time this podcast airs, our product will launch and be out that has WMAS capabilities. And just real quick to recap, WMAS stands for Wireless Multi-Channel Audio System, and it's a set of specifications basically that any wireless manufacturer can adopt. And they have to design their own technology to fit within those specifications. What that means is you may see different applications. In fact, you will see different applications of how WMAS is used. So just because something says WMAS doesn't mean that it's going to operate the same as manufacturer XYZ's WMAS product. So we are very excited to be, implementing this technology on a platform that, frankly, has been a highly anticipated release. We've been asked this question for many, many, many years now. It seems like, when are you going to create a digital wireless in-ear system?
Right.
And so, yeah. So
I've heard that.
Bang, there it is. Fireworks. We need, some kind of cool thing. But
We'll add it in post.
yeah, right. Yeah. What I'd love to chat with you about a little bit first is Axient Digital PSM. It's a great segue to kind of come from the WMAS conversation to talk about Axient Digital PSM because it, like I said, it's a highly awaited product and there's a lot to it. Let's just start with the beginning. Like if I said the words Axient Digital and then PSM, like what would you expect? You'd probably expect it to be within that Axient line, right? The moniker, the top of the line product. So you're going to want to have the best sounding in-ear system that we have, right? You would probably expect it to have digital RF, of course. What about wide tuning transmitters and receivers coming from whether you're PSM 300, a 900, or a 1000 user? Those are relatively wideband, but now we're talking about like the entire UHF spectrum, basically covering the whole spectrum. You might also assume that these things could be remotely controlled through ShowLink, just like Axient. And you probably also want to be able to connect to it with your favorite digital audio platform, like whether that's Dante or AES, etc. So even if we just stopped right there, this product is the next generation in personal monitoring systems, and we're super excited to kind of get it launched and get it out there. The
But wait,
component,
there's more.
yeah,
I like it.
yeah. So have a quick look here. There's going to be a quad and a dual transmitter. There's going to be body pack receivers. Of course, there will be rechargeability. There will be a 4-bay docking charger. And we do have new accessories like combiners, 8-port and 2-way combiner. So a little bit deeper dive into this. This is our next gen digital radio technology. It will also include the channel quality metering. So if you remember on Axient Digital, when we launched that, surely you can see the amount of RF coming in, but that really doesn't mean anything. You need to know that the RF coming in is good RF,
Right.
and that's the channel quality metering that's in there. Wide tuning range, 184 megahertz. So that gives you a lot of space to dance and move around in the UHF spectrum. I mentioned those digital inputs, whether it's AES3, AES67, Dante. There'll be a 4-port kind of network switch on the back that's configurable, just like you've come to expect with, for instance, ULXD and Axient Digital.
Yeah.
Those receiver body packs will have that ShowLink control. And there's some really cool features that I can't wait to tell you about in a second. Battery life is going to be about 6 hours. Of course, the design and durability that you come to expect from Shure. On the digital side, there's going to be, it's less than 2.9 milliseconds of latency. And this is an important thing. I don't want to lose track of this. The first thing that happens when we've had this out on several tours and, in the field testing, and the first thing that the artists notice immediately is like, it sounds so transparent. There's no hiss, there's no noise, there's no issues. It sounds cleaner and clearer than I've ever heard before. So that's really cool. Here's this 4-channel wideband technology. This is this WMAS. This will be WMAS compatible. But there's so much more cool stuff about it. There's other ways that it can transmit, including spatial diversity. I'll talk about that in a little bit. There is internal combining. So, Duke, to your point a little bit, we were chatting offline about how convenient it is to have cascade ports on like ULXD or Axient and minimize all the extra cabling and antennas. So same thing here. We'll do internal combining. In narrowband transmission mode, we're looking at 17 systems up and operating in a 6 megahertz channel. So I'm kind of alluding to the fact that there's different operating modes, right? I talked about 4-channel wideband, which is WMAS. I just now mentioned 17 max systems per 6 megahertz channel. That is narrowband. That's like what we know from ULXD or Axient Digital today.
Which is impressive enough.
Yeah. Yes,
For sure.
absolutely. There will be a bit of a phased release here. In release 1, first day or, when it starts shipping, we expect to have ShowLink control. Of course, encryption. Now, I know not a lot of people care about encryption, but some of our end users really care about encryption for IFB and things. Some of the high-tech companies are worried about the wrong folks listening in. Of course, network syncing, the spatial diversity. I can't wait to tell you about it. Hang on. Smart combiners, more to come. Q mode. This is another big, we've completely rethought Q mode. This is essentially a mode where a monitor engineer can load up everybody's, mixes on one pack and be able to scroll through anybody's mix quickly to figure out what's going on there.
Nice.
Also WMAS mode. Guess what? You'll be able to firmware update over show link now instead of standing in front of the transmitter trying to get the thing to update. Yeah, that alone will make it worth it for some people. Analog FM mode. What is analog FM mode? If our users have a lot of PSM 1000 rigs around, you don't have to get rid of those body pack receivers. You can actually turn this into a PSM 1000 transmitter and use your PSM 1000 receivers. So if you need to kind of step into this instead of going full in, this might be a great way to get into this next generation while still utilizing your existing hardware. And then future, here's kind of some of the dreamy stuff. What if we could offer you maybe channel expansion licenses within one box? What if you wanted to turn your 4-channel, stereo system into an 8? Interesting. We know we need to have point-to-point mode, which that's certainly something that whether you're trying to mic up or let's say audio distribution to a golf course, you want to do that wirelessly, right? You don't want to lay wires all over the place. Or maybe you're on campus at church and you want to get a signal from one place to another. We used to have that in the old analog world. It worked well. But since we went digital, until we had a digital receiver, this was not really quite possible. So point-to-point mode's in there. Frequency diversity. This is another Axient moniker, right? Being able to operate on 2 different frequencies simultaneously so that if one takes a hit, you never notice, and it heals and integrate. You have interference mitigation built in as well.
Wow.
So digging a little deeper on the components themselves, the key features, like I've mentioned already, digital RF modulation. So it can operate much more spectrally efficient with those wide tuning transmitters and receivers. I no longer have to worry about what frequency band I got to pick. I pretty much just covered over the entire UHF spectrum.
Yeah, man, if you're touring, that's amazing.
Yeah. Those digital audio inputs are important. And then again, this is most important to point out here about our product is that there are multiple transmission modes, and not just within WMAS, but literally analog FM, current narrowband digital transmission, and WMAS. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
The transmitter, here's a quad, here's a close-up picture kind of the back end of it. There's 4 channels of stereo transmission, 4-port networking switch that includes that Dante primary and secondary backup if you want to configure your system that way. Compatible through the XLR connectors with AES-3 or AES-67, again, over the same Dante ports. And what's really cool is that these radios can be internally combined. So while you see multiple RF connections on the back, that's for something else that I'm going to talk about. You could have all of those transmits combined internally down to just one antenna, one transmit antenna, and you're good to go. Notice also that there is a dual, AC port for cascading of AC, cleaning up your rack again further. There's an option that you can run a DC power supply. This is popular for more of like the broadcast type situations where it might be on a truck or on a cart somewhere and your power is running over DC. In this case, it's a dual redundant power supply. You could power with AC and DC. The dual transmitter looks about like half of the quad. Only 4-port XLR connections, but again, you don't lose any of the other features. You still have AES-3, AES-67, internal RF combining, that 4-port network switch. The body pack is really cool. It's been redesigned. It's similar in size to the ADX1. It's a little bit different, but it does use the ADX1 battery, which is super cool. If you already are using ADX1 series stuff, all the charging will remain the same for the battery itself if you wanted to use that. But check this out: locking headphone connector, Of course, I've mentioned tuning bandwidth is wide. Diversity antennas, 2 different antennas. There are literally 2 different radio head ends in this little compact receiver that's receiving signal from both of those antennas separately. That's huge. It is ShowLink enabled, and there are external charging points for that docking charger. I know a lot of our houses of worship love the docking charger because that's where the thing goes, right? When you're done with it, put it on the docking charger so we don't lose it or whatever. Huge improvement in stereo separation. I had the number, I want to say it's like 150 plus dB of stereo separation. It's just huge. With these new components, you're going to need to use new antenna combining. This is our new 8-port passive combiner. This is really cool. There is a communications link that happens between this passive combiner and the transmitters. We know that there's gain loss that happens depending upon how many units are connected together or how much wiring we have. This combiner actually is intelligent enough to go back to the transmitter and say, hey, I need makeup gain here. You need to increase your output power by X. That's super cool. That, of course, can be networked because it's part of, again, the whole Axient system. And as you see here, again, cascading with AC or that DC option again. So when you consider potential future use here, that combined potential channels could be up to 32 transmits from a single combiner. Again, I can't help but think about our conversation, Duke, that we just had. Like, how do we, mitigate all the extra failure points and all this kind of stuff? This is certainly one way to do it. And cleaning up your rack density. We know that, again, a lot of these places don't have a lot of space for a bunch of extra gear in a rack. So, also getting updates, the old favorite UA221 has become the AD221. It is a passive combiner as well. It's been rebuilt to actually, be much more compatible in the field. For those of you that know the UA221, it's just in like a little plastic container, and it's been a great standby. No doubt it's been good. But this also, again, when you're using the AD8C, this is also part of that intelligent loop that is taken into consideration about, hey, I need to be able to change my output power based on loss through the system. So the docking station is a little different, although it's using the ADX1 battery, which is called the this SB910. It uses the same battery. The body pack itself is a little different shape. So there is its own docking station. And as you would expect, you can either throw a battery in it or you can dock the transmitter right in it. The receiver. But it is a new network 4-bay charger that is specific to our AD PSM. Now, I've talked about this ShowLink integration, and what I'm going to show you is a rendering, and it's probably already going to be out of date by the time we launch here. But in Wireless Workbench, there are things like that channel quality meter. Now, remember, this is coming off of the body pack, right? So remember that we've never been able to see this kind of stuff before. The body pack itself has all kinds of data and information that has otherwise just stayed, there. Now with remote control and Wireless Workbench, we can see details like the actual quality of the RF that's getting to that body pack receiver. There's a link indicator that shows your ShowLink compatibility or how good your ShowLink is. What if you knew exactly where the volume knob was on that thing? I can't tell you how many times in my at my church, my house of worship, gain structure's just kind of messed up. Like they've jacked up the Aviom system that's kind of funky, and then they have their PSM 1000 thing set up, and they're like, man, all I can hear is whatever XYZ instrument. And I was like, well, where's your volume set? Well, I had to turn it all the way down. Oh, okay. Yeah, I can see that now, right? You can see that,
That's my
or they
favorite
have it
feature.
cranked clear up.
Yeah.
Oh my
Um,
gosh.
So seeing this is cool. What about headphones? What if we could tell you that there's actually a headphone either plugged in or not? This was a lot of show related stuff like, hey, I can't hear anything. Oh, well, your headphone isn't plugged all the way in. You didn't seat it correctly or whatever.
That's
Oh, that's
awesome.
amazing.
Other things like battery status meter, of course, you would expect, and encryption status if the devices were encrypted or not. Let's dig into these transmission modes just a little bit. I told you I was excited to talk about spatial diversity. And how am I doing on time, by the way?
You're good.
You're great.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Spatial diversity is like mind blowing. This is really cool. Spatial diversity allows us to have two different transmit antennas that have exactly the same data on it, right? Carrying the same RF signal, basically. But I can now space those antennas apart. So again, let me state this again. Two different antennas on the same RF channel, both transmitting what is basically the same RF information, digital word stream, sorry. It's the same ones and zeros, basically. Well, check this out. This graphic here is showing a flat body pack. It's funny. But I've got my two different antennas, because remember, the body pack is a diversity receiver, so I have two true different antennas. This blue antenna will transmit, and this receive antenna will get that data. But this antenna over here will get the same data at a different point in time. The same thing happens with the red antenna. It's transmitting, it's hitting this antenna at one point in time, and the other transmit's hitting at the other antenna at a different point in time. In the past, like with an analog signal, you would think of this as like multipath or fading or some kind of issue that would cause this. In this scenario, we're actually using those four discrete RF signal paths, right? We got 1, 2 from the blue, 3, 4 from the red, using all four of them to completely reassemble that word stream inside the body pack. So this is like a way to have a completely rock solid reception scheme on that performer where you just can't stand to have dropouts. Is that crazy?
That's awesome.
So some people say, is that like frequency diversity? No, it's not really like frequency diversity. It's spatial diversity. We're using space to split the things out, create space between the antennas, and have these four different signal paths. However, frequency diversity will also eventually be available. So this means that the receiver can receive on two different frequencies simultaneously, which means you have to transmit on two different frequencies. So for those of you doing the math at home, yes, for one receiver, you just bought two transmitters, basically, right? Two radios to transmit on. But the deal is, like, I can transmit here on this frequency and a second frequency. And if I take a hit on the second frequency, you can choose to have it automatically deploy a new good clean frequency, or you can manually deploy a new one. But the reality is, again, the performer ideally would never hear that happen. It would be a seamless type of transition between the different frequencies. Again, creating much more rock solid.
So spatial diversity is more about sort of double coverage of or multiple coverage from a distribution of RF standpoint. The frequency diversity is more about double coverage from an RF hit standpoint. So if a frequency, because I mean, if you had spatial diversity on 525 megahertz, it doesn't matter how many places it's coming out of. If something else jumps into that range, you're going to take an RF hit. So like spatial diversity is just all about giving you better coverage of transmission, whereas the frequency diversity is all about giving you a backup of RF if there's a hit.
Exactly. And so again, to your point, Duke, if I had something come on air that's on this same frequency in spatial diversity, it's far less likely that I will actually suffer a loss because I have 4 different looks at that data coming
Right.
in. And that one frequency that's coming in to interject or kind of jam one of these things is not going to jam at every single one of these points in space. Whereas here, you're exactly right. If it comes on channel right here with this one, it's going to say, "Oh, I'm going to move to a new good clean channel
Yeah.
and avoid it altogether."
So
Yeah.
between the two, like it's you're talking a near impossibility of dropping your in-ears.
I suppose there's something that could make it happen, but for anyone who's had complaints thus far, I think we're going to take care of them. I think this will address it.
That's so cool.
Very cool.
And so I want to kind of loop back around now about multi-channel wideband transmission. Remember we talked about narrowband RF carriers, and this is like how Axient Digital works, ULXD, of course, ADPSM is going to have this option as well. But we will also now be able to offer a WMAS mode with our technology. And there will be 4 carriers. Basically, the way this works, they all kind of are shoved together to make a 4 megahertz wide chunk. And each carrier can have 5 subcarriers. So for those that are, again, doing the math, this could be 20 channels of ears in a 4 megahertz chunk. So again, to be clear, I'm taking a much wider chunk of spectrum. But in that wide chunk of spectrum, I could deploy up to 20 channels of systems versus, I got another slide a little bit later on what this looks like. Let me just jump to it right now. Let's see, where did it go?
That's insane.
Maybe I'm sorry. Maybe it's not here. But I think everyone kind of gets the idea that we're kind of slotting those things in. And further to the point, the question has come up. Okay, digital. There's no such thing as a free lunch. The second
Right.
we go to digital, there's going to be delay in the system. And we've had this out on several major tours for a while. For some of you, this is one of kind of like the least best kept secrets that we've had. But even in digital mode with 2.9 milliseconds of latency fixed, horn players and singers are the ones that are usually the most irritated by delay. And even with digital consoles and digital microphones, this latency has not shown to be an issue yet. So I think that's kind of the sweet spot we want to be. In the event that you have somebody that says, I can hear it, and there are people, there are, and it's usually singers and horn players because time zero is yourself. It's not like you're playing guitar with it. You're used to having an amp 10 feet behind you or even drums. It really mostly affects singers and horn players. You could use analog transmission mode and you're back down to 0.7 milliseconds mode. That's PSM 1000. So that's the PSM 1000, legacy mode, basically. In both transmission schemes, you'll be able to have show link control, but you're only going to get encryption, true digital diversity, spatial diversity, frequency diversity, and that spectral efficiency on the digital side. So this kind of gets back to what I'm excited about with our implementation of WMAS is that we're not asking you, our users, to completely rethink your entire workflow and how you're used to deploying systems. We're giving you all the options, hopefully, that you might need to be as spectrally efficient as you can be or want to be, while leaving room for for other wireless systems. We know we want to be the only wireless user that, or wireless manufacturer anybody uses. Um, Once in a while we lose to somebody else, but we might still have some stuff in there. My point is, we know we just can't suck up all the spectrum and expect that you're only going to buy our product. So we're trying to be specific, good stewards of the spectrum, and allow you more space to do other things with.
Well, and the product has to be in palatable chunks from a price perspective as well, right? I mean, if you only can buy a box that does 24 or 30 channels and that's your only option, you're spending an awful lot of money just to get 8 channels of something, if that's all you need, and you're trying to be forward thinking. So, I mean, it's got to be responsible from a palatability standpoint as well.
Yeah. Yep.
So, no,
That's my quick spiel there
so
on 80 PSM.
so
It's
dream with
exciting
us
times.
a minute. So, I mean, that's incredible. But dream with us a minute. What kinds of things, and I know you've got to be careful with what you might know versus what you hope will happen someday. But with WMAS, what kinds of things can you see, or do you hope to see coming down the road, that's going to make the world of wireless users really happy?
Yeah, absolutely. Again, one of the benefits of WMAS, just to reiterate it, is that you no longer have to worry about coordinating. So if you had 20 channels of PSM that you want to get up and running, you just find your 4 megahertz chunk and it does all the work for you. So when you start thinking about the ease of deployment in higher channel count systems and the fact that you're not worried about coordinating those frequencies, I think the RF nightmare that we all continue to live is going to be, that burden's going to be a little lessened.
Mm-hmm.
And what the other thing that we haven't really talked about is what happens when something does come on air in those WMAS channels, because you're still could suffer from some dropouts or something like that, depending on what happens there. I'm excited to see our technology come out because it really does a great job of not failing, even when something else comes on in one of those carrier channels. Um, so that's another thing that to think about and look forward to is like, even if somebody comes in and turns a wireless system on, is that going to what is that going to do to my system? You know what the answer is today, but in the future, like, this is more bulletproofing of wireless systems. Um, I think that I had mentioned this a little bit in the WMAS conversation we had, but there may be other chunks of spectrum that we could deploy our version of WMAS into if we're allowed to get access to that. Again, this is all petitioning FCC and working with the other entities that already manage those chunks of spectrum. Um, so that brings another possibility of like, maybe there's more chunks of spectrum we could operate in to even get more channels on the air. And I know most, like when you talk about the Super Bowl, the big game, um, there are thousands of channels of wireless that have to get coordinated and dealt with.
Right.
And they do an incredible job, those guys that do that. But the demand for wireless mics is not going to go down, or wireless anything, sorry. The demand is not going to decrease while spectrum is going to continue to shrink. So I'm kind of excited to see how we land, where we land. I had shared again in that WMAS conversation that the specification really only requires 3 audio channels per megahertz. And that could be one way or the other way, or it could be bidirectional. And so I think, as we dream about things that could be and what matters to the customers and what they want to use, like, I like the idea of some bidirectionality stuff.
Mhm.
I can't wait for, how we might be able to play together between mics and body pack receivers. The curious thing to me again is like workflow. How does this impact someone's workflow? So if there's comments or something, I'd love to hear this. As you can see, what we've tried to do at Shure is give you all the benefits of WMAS within the 80 PSM world, and still be good stewards of the spectrum, and give you other options as well to transmit on it, not just WMAS.
Right. No, I can definitely see some potential for, high capacity mic boxes, whether it's 12, 16, whatever channels in one box. Just the amount of efficiency that can happen in that, not just from an RF standpoint, but even from a gear standpoint. As you and I were talking earlier, that's something we're always trying to pay attention to. It's like, even with like a ULXD quad, which is amazing, we have 4 channels in a box and they cascade with antennas, so we're able to ditch the antenna distribution. We don't have to have multiple sets of antennas. Like there's an efficiency even from a hardware perspective. Like I can see that, and an install perspective, because we're Dante out on those as opposed to connectors for everything. So it becomes more efficient from an install perspective, from a hardware perspective, even a reliability perspective, data perspective. We're getting a lot more information out of those than we get out of, single channel wireless units. So like, I love the efficiency, and based on what I know about WMAS so far, it seems like that's just going to go next level. The idea of someday having a single rack unit that does 12 wireless mics and 12 channels of in-ears, like that blows my mind. Like that could be really, yeah, right.
12
But
and
I mean,
12, is that the number?
yeah, it sounds like those kinds of things are possibilities as this technology kind of starts to evolve, and as product development gets more and more time with what this all looks like. I mean, obviously we're still waiting for it to become government official, but it sure seems like those kinds of things are the potential, and that, man, I can get excited about that.
Yeah. I mean, even if it was, I was just, when you were talking, Duke, I was thinking, even if it was 2 rack spaces, like,
Well, yeah,
totally. I
totally.
would just get like, just for the number of connectors you're going to need. But I mean, man, just have a 2 rack space unit, stick it in there, and you're.
But some industries are like you mentioned IFBs earlier, like guys who are using both a lapel and a return in-ear. I mean, if that can all be done in one pack and done well, all in one pack, that thing becomes really, really powerful.
Yeah.
I mean, you're like borderline comm systems at that point. I mean, really nice comm systems, but
well, and that like it's like on Broadway, the theater industry and stuff like that, that would just be a complete game changer for them. Just to have that kind of reliability all in one pack, because that's such a precarious thing.
Spatial diversity. I mean, oh my gosh, that changes their world. I mean, they're finding all kinds of crazy ways to do it, but it would just be easy and would just work and take up half the rack or less rack space. So
you guys have already designed it. I mean, let me get over to in production.
Great.
I mean, this stuff's all easy, right? It's just widgets and ones and zeros. So somebody's
got that done.
That's what I think sometimes. But then the guys back there, they're actually making it happen. They're like, "You're nuts. You're crazy."
Yeah. No, I just
can't have that done by next week. What?
Right. Just put one of those power supplies in that. Put a cover on it. It'll be great.
Yeah.
No, I love the efficiency of where we're headed. I still have dreams of those kinds of things coming down to some of the lower product world as well. I still have dreams of like a quad QLXD box and maybe even lower, just because the efficiency of deployment, the efficiency of install, in all digital product, it just changes the world for most users, and it just makes it so much more doable. And I think there's some other arguments too in sustainability and all those things too. It's a lot less metal that's getting wasted. There's a lot less components that get wasted if you can condense higher channel counts in smaller boxes. So I love all that too.
Right.
But yeah, I just making it easier, making it less things that you have to buy, while improving reliability. Those are massive wins in my book, and that's what I see WMAS doing for us.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yep.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I think it's really cool.
Well,
Man.
thanks for having me on. I really appreciate you guys, reaching out to us. We're always cooking something up, it seems like. And
I've actually heard that exact phrase. Every time I ask our rep, Sam, about something, he says, Shure is always working on new and wonderful things. So
Yep.
yeah,
Yeah.
we got to keep those guys, turning the hamster wheel somehow. And they do a good job of it. Sometimes I feel like it's going to fly off the rate that we're coming out with stuff lately, but yeah.
Well, at least Shure is doing something very unique, because most of technology these days, they have to keep the applications people busy, and they are busy coming out with things that break all the things we like on the product. But Shure does not do that. Shure always comes out with stuff that actually makes the product better and makes it more usable. So that is kind of a juxtaposed to anything, well, especially computer related. I mean, anybody ask me what was the best version of so-and-so, I go, I was about 12 revisions back. That's when it was at sweet spot. And now it's just like, sorry, it's good. Now it's all downhill from here, So
Yep.
I appreciate that Shure has continued to make products actually better and more usable. So
yes,
that certainly has been something. Yeah. It's been something that, of late too, that we're very focused on, and that is providing, when we do a firmware update, it needs to unlock usable features too, not just like patches or, of
right.
course that's going to happen. If you find a bug or
Right.
there's an issue or something, of course that's going to happen. But we really want to release firmware updates that mean something,
Right.
Mm-hmm.
that can add some functionality or some features to the products. So
Yeah. No, it's good stuff.
Very
Good
cool.
stuff. Well, again, if you missed the background on WMAS, there's a link below that you can go back and watch the first episode we did, just to get your head wrapped around what the heck we're talking about, because half of this didn't make any sense for you if you haven't seen that yet.
Yep.
And then there were some resources as well if you want to dig in and learn more on that episode as well. But there's lots of cool stuff coming out. Obviously, we're getting Shure's perspective on it. I'm sure other manufacturers are working up some cool stuff too. But I just, like I said, I love the efficiency. I love the capacity things that are coming in a world that just seems to be shrinking. So lots of great stuff. And Shure Axient PSM out now. So hey, if you are looking for a few of those, we know a guy. Give us a call.
Yeah.
there you go.
Yeah. Thanks, Chris. Always good hanging with you.
So big
See you
thanks to
guys
Chris.
next time.
Obviously, if you're watching this, make sure you like and subscribe and all the things. It makes Van happy. It warms his heart when you subscribe. So if you don't do it for yourself, do it for Van.
Yeah. Tell a friend.
All right. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. We'll catch you next episode.